Good morning, and welcome back to the origin, which is really welcome back to the future, as we have now a starting point with the discovery of that extraordinary image I was showing yesterday. I had some technical difficulties with my new program. I'm trying to create a kind of an expanded PowerPoint. I'm tired of PowerPoints, and I'm sure some of you are too. So that's why I had so many problems, but I really wanted to say a few words about this idea of going back, the kind of coherent return to, now that we have a real evidence of the Big Bang, this coherent return back to the origin. And this revision of this extraordinary expansion of time through the various development of galaxies and the development of first elements, life, and language. And what we are doing now is probably one of the most important things that humans can do, which is to look back on that history and find out where we come from, and being probably, now we don't know about the other elements in the universe and the other human or the other living beings in the universe, and we can't speculate about that, but we know we're alive, and we know that we are looking at this very attentively. And so the possibility of going back, looking at this thing is unique. And when William James says that consciousness is the return of evolution on itself, evolution looking at itself, it is an extraordinary thing to do. And the concentration that we find in the research that is done at CERN is repeated in some ways with our own presence here. We're all interested, very strongly interested in this fundamental question of origin, and we're all part of this consciousness being evolution turning back on itself. So it's a role that we all share, which I think is an extraordinary experience, and I'm very grateful to be part of it. And so is also Humberto Maturana, who I'm going to present right away. He is typically one of those of which one says he needs no introduction, but nevertheless, fundamentally, I should say a few words. Humberto Maturana is a biologist, part of the second wave of the cyberneticians as well, and of course an important philosopher, and we share one very strong interest in that we're both fascinated by epistemology, which is how do we come to the ideas that we have, how do we make up our mind. With Francisco Varela, who passed away, both of them developed the concept of autopoiesis, which is a bit what I was talking about yesterday with Norman Deutsch. We are recreating ourselves, and that's something that we're doing live right now. He actually followed the work of Gregory Bateson and also of Wittgenstein, and developed what is called constructivist epistemology and cultural biology. And he is also interested in the biology of love. He is going to explore with us several themes of this return to the origin. And so I think perhaps rather than take his word, I should invite Humberto Maturana to join us. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You have applauded your expectations, but expectations are never fulfilled, nor those that one has about others, not about oneself. So you know that your expectations will not be fulfilled. My expectations will not be fulfilled either. So we are free. We can listen and we can talk. ¿Cuándo hay? ¿Cómo avanza acá? Ah. I had to look to the left or to the right. Not there. That's myself. This logo is interesting for what I'm going to say. This word matristica, by the way, uses the word matrix in its double meaning. It means uterus and network of relations, and refers to the biological matrix of human existence. That is the theme, so to say, in this school. And there the logo, this closed arrow, represents a living being, a human being, and the curved line underneath is that part of the medium in which the living being realizes itself, the niche. Now, we usually speak about the organism and the niche as separate entities, and sometimes biologists ask the question of whether there are empty niches. Well, one cannot do that. In fact, organism and its niche constitute a unity. You cannot separate one from the other. They exist together. The niche arises with the organism. And if there is not an organism that is giving rise to the niche, there is no niche. So the interesting thing about seeing this unity is that the history of living systems, the history of human beings, is the history of the coherent transformation of the organism and its niche. Well, this is our theme, the origin. How did everything begin? Everything? What do I mean? Or this is our theme. What does it mean, everything? Now, do we dare to look about the origin of everything? Because this is, one has to be audacious in order to dare to see whether one wants to make the claim, I'm claiming that something begins in that moment. And that is an act of choice, and we may have fundaments or whatever it is, but let us dare. We, human beings, are living beings. That means that we exist in the realization of our living. The word mentioned a moment ago, autopoiesis, means that self-production, not self-reproduction, self-production. We exist in the continuous production of ourselves. And this is it. If that continuous production is interfered with, we die, we disappear. We exist in a dynamic of continuous self-production. Mothers know this very well. This is why they take care that their children eat. Because what they eat becomes them, and if they do not eat, autopoiesis, the self-production stops, and the child dies. And we do whatever we think, whatever we imagine, whatever we do, whatever we think, whatever we imagine occurs as part of the realization of our living. So you are listening, you are realizing you are living, and you listen whatever you listen from yourself. In my talk, I am realizing my living, in my thinking. All this occurs not while we are alive, in the actual realization of our living, in this continuous process of self-production. And during the realization of the living. When you are sleeping, you are realizing you are living. When you are dreaming, you are realizing you are living. This is the autopoiesis. This is continuous self-production. If we were to come back to this logo, the autopoiesis will be occurring in the dynamic enclosed evocatively by this closed arrow. And the manner of living will be taking place in the way this is realized in the relation with the niche. So as part of our realization in our niche, we're doing things, we're thinking, we imagine, occurs as part of the realization of our living and in the realization of our living. Well, now this is not trivial matter, because it turns out then that the astronomer, the physicist, the biologist, the philosopher, the cook is a human being. And whatever he or she does in astronomy, in physics, in biology, or in cooking, he or she is doing it in the realization of his or her living. And there is something else which I wish to evoke with this expression, structural determinism. We expect everything to occur in some manner in which it is made. And the enchantment of a magician performance in which things appear or disappear has to do with our surprise in that something that we expected did not happen. And we ask, how was it done? What is the structural dynamics that make that to occur? And we're charmed by being cheated, because things are occurring as if they were violating structural determinism, but nothing can occur violating structural determinism. So we attempt to find how it was done, or we want to explain. We want to explain our life, we want to explain the movement of the planets, we want to explain astronomy, whatever it is, and we want to do it conserving structural determinism. And this is our fundamental, unconscious, explicit or implicit trust in all that we do. Even in quantum mechanics, we expect that quantum mechanics operates according to the regularities of quantum mechanics. Should not operate according to the regularities of classic physics, should operate according to the regularities of that particular domain that we refer to when we speak of quantum physics, for example. And this is other thing which is very fundamental. We live as valid whatever we live. We live, our feeling is that what we are living is valid. This is the case. And if for some reason we doubt, we are surprised because we are living as valid our doubt too. We live as valid whatever we live in the moment in which we live it. And the way we live follows the path of what we accept as valid in the realization of our living. So nothing in our life is trivial. We believe something, our life goes this way. We stop believing, stop accepting that valid, and accept as valid something else, our life goes another way. And this is happening continuously here. I mean, you are listening to me, and what you think, and you think, oh, this person is saying something interesting, and there you go. Or you say, feel, this person is something that is nonsense, and there you go. And we do, sometimes we make an effort, we make an argument, and there we go, in the characteristics that the argument that we're making define. In addition, we live in language. Languaging. The word language is a noun, but nouns hide verbs. The power of the noun is hidden in the verbs. It's the verb that makes the noun do whatever it is supposed to do. And the verb may be the same word with a different expression. For example, when I say here, we live as languaging beings, I'm claiming that our living occurs in the languaging. It's part of the realization of our living as human beings. We are languaging beings. We human beings are languaging beings. Language occurs as a flow of living together. So I'm claiming that, well, yes, of course, we can be in a soliloquy, but the soliloquy has sense in our living with others. Yes, languaging being. If there is no other being there with whom to language, when there is no language. And of course, the question is, how did language arise in the first place? But language occurs in recursive coordinations of behavior. If you pay attention to what we do with language, you will realize that we coordinate our behaviors. And do not only coordinate our behaviors, but we coordinate our coordinations of behavior. And this is language. A simple coordination of behavior does not constitute language. A recursion must take place, a coordination of behavior for this phenomenon to occur. Now, recursions are very interesting because whenever there is a recursion, something new appears. And the recursion occurs with the association of a cyclic phenomenon with a linear one. When the cyclic dynamic occurs and then occurs again on top of the consequences of its previous occurrence, then you have a recursion. And the interesting thing with recursion is that something intrinsically new appears. You cannot deduce what is going to appear in the recursion. You have to live it. It's new. It's not a logical conclusion, it's something new. A new domain appears. And the new domain appears in this recursion is language. So language occurs as a flow of living together in recursive coordinations of behaviors, coordinations of behavior, that is, recursive coordinations of feelings, emotions, and doings. And we all know that this is the case. I mean, because I'm not presenting this as a definition or a supposition. I'm talking about your, my, our daily living as languaging beings. At the same time, as languaging beings, we live in network of conversations. Now, I insist in this because sometimes we speak as if language were abstract. Yes, of course, we can use it to make symbolizations, and symbolizations appear as a recursion in our languaging. But language has the concreteness of the doings that are coordinated in the flow of languaging. We speak of conversations when we attend to the inner feelings and emotions that guide our recursive coordinations of behavior. It's the emotion that guides the coordinations of behavior that gives the character to the network of languaging, which is the conversation. And you can notice that when the emotion is changing, what is happening, the world that is appearing there is changing. We say we human beings are rational beings, and I'm saying here that we are emotional beings. Of course we are rational, but we use our rationality to validate or to invalidate our emotions, our desires. I wish this, and my reasons are, and we develop a rational argument. Oh, I have this desire, but I know that I should not have it, blah, 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 blah. I develop a rational argument. So here we are. We follow our emotions, our preferences, our desires, the things that we like or dislike. This is what orients and guides what we do on our living. And on that, we put rational arguments to validate or to invalidate. And what is a rational argument? A rational argument is a construct on the coherences and regularity that arise by accepting certain basic premises. Every rational argument is founded on basic premises accepted a priori, because one wants them to be there. So, every rational argument is developed on non-rational grounds, on desires, preferences, purposes, intentions. And this is good. I mean, this is not a limitation. This is what we are. And this is the beauty of what we do as human beings. I was going to make a drawing. I shall make it one drawing there, but this is this face on a corner is an observer, any one of us, a human being, a living being in language that makes distinctions. And what do we do as observers? Make distinctions. Where and whatever we do, when we distinguish it. For example, there an arrow points to the inside of this circle, this closed arrow that is a living being, physiology, the dynamics of physiology, the dynamics of the processes of self-production, and to the relational domain in its relation within each. I'm calling that behavior, conduct, behavior. And these two domains are disjoint. You cannot deduce one from the other. If you observe the history of an organism, you can make historical correlations between what is happening in the physiology and what happens in the relation within each. But it's a correlation, it's not a deduction. A good clinician is the person that has been examining, treating many cases of some particular disease, and then it is enough to observe the behavior for him to claim that there is such and such a phenomenon in the physiology. It appears as a deduction, but it is not a deduction, it is a correlation. And we frequently confuse this thing. We flatten one thing on the other, as if one could make, in this confusion, one would treat this as a one thing. Yes, we can treat it as a one thing if we look from a certain perspective in which we look at the totality, which is another domain of observation, of distinction. And this drawing shows there two living beings, A and B, in a medium, interacting, and the arrows do not mean information, mean only encounters. Forget the word information, doesn't enter here. Encounters. And the interesting thing is that the encounters trigger structural changes. But in the encounter, if A incites on B, triggers in B something determined in B, not by A, and vice versa, or with respect to C. And in this dynamic, if the process continues recursively, what you have is that A, B, and C change together congruently. And there are, of course, some arrows missing between A and B in the lower part of the drawing. And this happens spontaneously. If you were here yesterday, you are different now than what you were yesterday at the beginning of the day. And you have changed coherently with the interactions in which you were listening to whoever presentations were taking place, or the conversations you took, or the stroll that you made outside the room. So we are all different today than what we were yesterday. Indeed, we are already different from what we were half an hour ago, or 20 minutes ago. And this happens spontaneously. And the interesting thing is that being this the case, we exist in many domains. There I have written in one corner, espacio psíquico, of the psychic space, the arrow for the internal dynamic, physiological domain, the bracket to refer to the relational domain. These are different domains of existence. We realize our living in all these different domains. If you are a physicist, you realize you are living in a particular domain that we call physics, and if you are a biologist, a different one, and if you are a literature person, then you live differently according to whatever your fantasy drives you to go. So you can become many things by being interested in many things. Organism and niche medium change together in a congruent manner. This is taking place all the time. We do not realize it. We think that the world is there independent of us and that we come into it, but indeed the world we live is appearing with us. But the interesting thing is that we, to the extent that we are structure-determining entities, the external entities that impinge upon us do not specify what happened in us. So this is why it's so interesting, this congruent change, because it's not that one specifies the other, they change together. If I have here a tape recorder, and I press the button that says recording and doesn't work, I do not go to the physician to examine my finger. Doctor, please examine my finger that my tape recorder doesn't work when I press the button recording. Because the finger that presses the button recording does not specify what happens in the tape recorder. What happens in the tape recorder arises determined in the structure, in the way the tape recorder is made. In that sense, we are not different. So this coherence with the medium is the result of changing together congruently, conserving something. But we conserve living, or a manner of living. Organism niche unity is what I have been talking. An organism and its niche constitute an operational relational unity. All of us. And the niche is not fixed. I was not part of your niche at 9 o'clock, but now I am part of your niche. And if you saw me there, you did not know who I was, well, somebody there was part of your niche, but now is part of your niche, Humberto Maturana, because everything is changing. We're changing together with the circumstance we live and which is arising with us living it. But the external elements cannot specify in us what happens when they impinge upon us. So in strict sense, we cannot say nothing about something external to us. And what we say is coordinations of our living in our niche. A, I, B, in the lower part of the drawing, in Tn, have transformed together with the niche. And they constitute a unity. And now they doing together, things generate a world of things of doing together. Among other things, languaging. So as living together arises, languaging arises as a manner of living together. And in this manner of living together, We can talk about external things which are not external indeed, but which are manners of living together. We generate the domain of shared objects, shared objectivities. The nervous system. Now, this is a very interesting thing, because we speak about the nervous system as an organ to obtain information from the medium, but does not work that way. If this, and I hope that this will appear somewhere, now you have to look. Please, whoever is facing this, I'm not the important thing, is what I am drawing in the board what is important. So this is so don't follow me in my movements, just remain with the, thank you very much. This is the organism, and this would be the nervous system. I shall draw it in red. And the nervous system is a network of elements interconnected in such a way that you can travel through it without ever coming out from it. If you move from neuron to neuron, you don't come out of it. But the nervous system intersects with the medium in certain areas which are called sensory and effector surfaces. So that's, I mean, you say this is an abstraction. Yes, it's an abstraction of the nervous system. If I have millions and billions of neurons, I'm not going to obscure your understanding by presenting all the neurons. So I present the nature of the connectivity. It's an interconnected system of elements that I'm going to call neuronal elements that intersect with the sensory and effector surfaces of the organism. They also incide and all that the nervous system does is generate internal correlations of changes of relations of activity inside, and sensory effector correlations in the organism, but the nervous system never meets the niche, never meets the medium. Whatever the niche does impinging on the organism triggers in the organism, in the nervous system, something determined in the nervous system. And the interesting thing with the nervous system is that operates distinguishing configurations. If you examine the way nerve cells operate, you can show that this tremendous arborization of this would be a neuron, as one could see it by staining it. The nerve impulse originates here and arises when certain configurations of activity in the connectivity of the nerve cell with other nerve cells take place. So the nervous system distinguishes configuration. I mean, this is a very fantastic thing. We see shapes, forms, configurations. We make abstractions because the nervous system operates distinguishing configurations as a consequence of the manner in which the nerve cells are made, and as a consequence that this point here, which is where the nerve impulse arises, responds to a configuration of activity in the other part of the nerve cell, in the dendritic arbor, in the branches of the nerve cell. So the nervous system operates distinguishing configurations of relations of activity within itself. Can say nothing about an external world. But in language, in doing things together, we generate the domain of interobjectivity, share objects by doing things together, which we can call it external world. But it's what we do together as entities that cannot say anything about something independent from them. So our human existence, in a way, is a continuous transcendency that occurs in the way we live together. As a result, the nervous system operates generating sensory affective correlations in the organism in its niche, and so the organism and niche change together congruently because the structure of the nervous system is not fixed, is changing in the contingencies of the interaction of the organism with the niche, and they transform together. That's we can say. But notice that we say nothing about an external reality. We say about how we operate in what we do. Furthermore, in our living, we do not distinguish in our experience between perception and illusions. We never know whether what we are living in one moment as valid, because everything that we live as valid. We are going to invalidate later as an illusion or as a mistake. Because we follow, in our thinking, in our doing, the path of what we accept as valid. And to accept something as valid is an emotional choice, regardless of the rational arguments that we may have to support our choice. And if we cannot say anything about something independent from what we do, and I'm not the first one to think this has been a problem along the history of humanity since very early. Indeed, the Occident and the Orient have separated around this matter of illusion or perception. Buddhism says everything is an illusion, but operates in the trust of the coherences of living anyhow. And we in Occident want everything to be reality, something independent from us. But we cannot claim that. Reality is an explanatory proposition. How come that? Well, that is real. Reality, and we make this gesture, is an explanatory proposition. And since if our living, if what we do are changing, well, we change what we say about this explanatory proposition. And if you think a little bit, you will realize that all the history of change of domains of knowledge are change of domains of doings, and arise as changes in our doings together, in the things we do together. And some of physicists yesterday even pointed to that if we do not change our doings, we do not change world. But we do not change world there, we change the world in what we do, whatever we do. This is a beautiful case. Is there a pond or not? I mean, this is a very interesting painting because the painter is testing his painting. Goes with his finger to touch the water that he has painted on the flat surface of the street. And it's beautiful. We see water in a hole. No? There is a depression in the street, and there is water, and you can put the little boat there. And then you can track with your finger the water and expect, you will expect something. And because your expectation is satisfied or not satisfied, you will say it is an illusion or not. Illusions are not in themselves. And an illusion is an experience that we live as valid in the moment that we live it, which we then invalidate through reference to another experience. The same thing happens with mistake. What do we know? What we see or what we do? Now, see there is, of course, being used as a reference to sensors. Huh? What we see, what we smell, what we touch, what we hear. If you were kind to cross your two fingers, there. You can look there that I'm crossing my two fingers and touch the nose with the two fingers simultaneously crossed. If the fingers are not crossed, it will not work. But if you touch simultaneously with the two fingers the tip of the nose, how many nose tips do you touch? Two. A mirror, somebody has a mirror to tranquilize my soul that I'm not having a double nose. So if I believe my touch, I have two nose tips. If I believe the mirror, I have only one. And so depending on to what I believe, where is the illusion? Well, themes to reflect, explanation, what is it to explain? What are explanations? What are? Explanations are, to us scientists, grown-ups, persons that want to know things properly, like the tits, how do you call them, the pacifiers that you use with the baby. The baby is crying. Wah, wah, wah. Where is the pacifier? Wah, wah. You give a pacifier, throw it away, and goes on crying until you find one pacifier. Oh. Stop crying. The explanations that we accept are like pacifiers. We stop asking questions. And of course, sometime later we may ask questions again, but the interesting thing is that the pacifier in the baby has a very peculiar characteristic. Arose with the baby using it, so there is a special congruence, structural congruence between the shape of the pacifier and the shape of the mouth and the sucking of the baby. Well, the same thing happens with explanations. Explanations are propositions that we make, generative propositions, proposition of processes, of mechanisms that if we let them operate, the result is the experience we want to explain. And if we accept that indeed that generative mechanism is giving such a result, we say, this is the explanation. And we go on following the consequences of having accepted that. Please, there is nothing wrong with that. This is the essence, and this is the greatness of us human beings. Because, as being in language, and language being a recursive system of coordinations of doing, we can reflect. We can ask about where are we, what we are doing. As a colleague of mine, Jimena Davila, depicts, she says, in the act of reflection, well, if you ask me on what am I standing, I cannot tell you, I don't see, because I am obscuring where I'm standing, so I have to look. In order to look, I have to step out. And now we can say where I was. That is reflection. But for that, I must be willing to step out. Oh, I know where I am, so I'm not going to reflect. Why? Let us not reflect. Let us not waste our time. We know where we are. But if you dare to reflect, you can look and say, oh, do I like to be where I was? And then you can reflect again and say, do I like what I like? And we human beings can do that. And we do that. And that is the experience of freedom, autonomy. It has nothing to do with diversity. It has to do with the feelings under which we do something. And this has to do with what we accept or we do not accept. And we do not accept or not accept something arbitrary necessarily, because it depends on the coherences and the transformation there that we have lived in the coherence with the niche and with the other beings with whom we are in our niche. Well, we can reflect about the laws of nature. And what are the laws of nature? Well, the laws of nature are abstractions that we make of the coherences of our living, of the coherences of the things that we do in our living. And how do we grasp coherences, configurations? Well, this is what the nervous system does, spontaneously. And the particulars are intersections of configurations. Because when we distinguish a configuration, we distinguish something which is general. It's independent of the elements that satisfy the configuration. Abstractions, yes, and this is very interesting. I mean, this marvelous thing has to do with our nervous system. When we make a formalism about something, the first operation is to abstract the basic configuration of relations which we are going to treat as the fundament for the development of our formalism. And we can do mathematical formalism because we operate on the conservation of configurations. And if some of the configurations that we're conserving stop being conserving, we say, well, the formalism we are developing is not adequate. And that, of course, we can do because the nervous system operates distinguishing configurations where, in its own dynamics, in the dynamics of the realization of its living. So, in fact, what this is showing is that the domain of realization of our living is the domain of existence of whatever we can do or distinguish. And of course, we make deductions, computations, in which we operate with the consequences of the conservation of the configurations that we have distinguished. Well, what do we do then? We explain the operational coherences of our living with the operational coherences of our living. And if you read any scientific paper, experimental paper, you will find very clearly stipulated what you have to do to have certain experience. So you have to do what you do, what instrument you do. If the child says, "Mother, I do not want to go to school today, I don't feel well," and so the mother says, "Please stay in bed, I'm going to bring you orange juice, but in the meantime, take the fever," puts the thermometer under the arm of the child, and the mother goes to the kitchen to fetch the orange juice, and the child takes out the thermometer and puts it near the lamp. And then put it here, and when the mother comes, look at the thermometer and say, "Oh, you have fever." What is the thermometer measuring? What is, or what I think? Or what I have designed it for? If I have designed the thermometer to measure temperature, whatever change in it, which produces a change in reading, I shall read as a change of temperature, because I have designed the instrument for that. So instruments do not tell us anything about something independent of what we do, either. What we call laws of nature are abstractions of the operational relational coherences of the realization of our living. And here is a basic law of nature. Whenever in a collection of elements, some configuration of relations begin to be conserved, a space is open for all else to change around the relations that are being conserved. And you can look this in your history, you can look at this in astronomy, in physics, whatever. And this is the essence of our trust in science and in formalisms. But this is not a definition. It's not a supposition. It's an abstraction of the coherence of our living. What happened when you went to the university to study? While you were conserving being a student, what you ate changed, where you sleep changed, how many hours you sleep changed, with whom you sleep changed. Everything changed around you conserving yourself as a student. Gravity is very important for the origin of the galaxies because it defines a domain of conservation of movement, for example. Well, what is to know? Knowledge is that which we ascribe to another person, that could be ourselves, when we see that she behaves in a manner that we consider adequate in the domain in which we observe her. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you think that what I'm saying is right, you are giving me my knowledge. And if you have been teachers, you will remember that this is exactly what you do when you want to assess the knowledge of your students. Because you define in your listening what you are going to accept as valid in the behavior of the other to say that he or she knows. And if the President of the Republic asks me, please, Humberto, come and be our Minister of Finance, I say, no, I know nothing about finance. And then he will say, I think you do. When I say I know nothing about finances, what I'm saying is, according to what I think that finances is, what kind of operations finances imply, I do not know how to perform them. I cannot perform them, so I claim not to know. But the president tells me, according to what I think that you can do, I think that you will do whatever is adequate in the Minister of Finance. So knowledge is not of the thing, it's an interpersonal relation. And this is not bad. We construct our worlds this way, but it's better that we know that we do so. We human beings are the origin of everything. And what about the Big Bang? Yes, of course, we are the origin of the Big Bang as well. Well, but the Big Bang as something independent from you, well, I cannot say of anything about something independent from me. All thing I can say, if I do this and this and this, I can explain this and this and this with the Big Bang. And we explain the past with the present. Time is not a physical magnitude. It's an imaginary dimension that we invent to correlate a distinction that we make of before and after in our living. But this doesn't mean the things are chaotic, that anything is possible. No, it means that the things that occur have to do with the fundamental conditions under which we human beings exist. Well, physicists have thought about the possibilities that the Creator had. Was God with the possibility of creating any universe? Well, if we look at our living now, according to our living now, we realize that for our living now, certain parameters, certain values of dimensions that of the measurements that we make must be satisfied. So the universe was created so that we human beings could exist, and was created in this way, with this characteristic, because if we are not those characteristics, we will not exist. But did it happen that way? I am tempted to tell you that when I was invited, I shall finish very shortly, 7 minutes, to come, I asked the organizers to give me the life history of every one of you. Where you were born, under what circumstances, what language, what schools you went, university, your travels. And if you think back to your own history, you will realize that everything that you did was bringing you here now. Try. And it's not true. Because you resulted here. We resulted here. We were not coming. We were not the present of a process that had an aim, that was going somewhere. We are beautiful results of this history in which we are part as human beings in the worlds that we generate together, directly or indirectly. Nothing exists by itself. Something exists as it arises with what we do, as we distinguish it. Now you remember yesterday physics were speaking about, telling about the difference between Einstein and Niels Bohr, and Einstein was speaking about how things were, and Niels Bohr wanted to speak about what we need to say, how things were. We cannot say anything about something independent of what we do, so if we accept that, it turns out that something exists only to the extent that we distinguish it. And what about the moon? Does the moon exist or not? Well, if we perform certain operations that constitute the operation of distinction moon, and as a result of those operations moon appears, then moon exists. Not in itself, but in the operation of distinction moon. But this is not a problem. I mean, this is what it are, and what we are. The world that we bring about with our existence is very beautiful. Fundamental relativity. Well, Einstein spoke about the special relativity, the general relativity. We have been speaking about the fundamental relativity. That is that which is the referent for everything. The art and science of what? Of living, of how we do what, of how we want to live, what do we want to conserve in our living? Because all this has to do with the fundamental relativity. Whatever we want, we are going to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living a moment of humanity in which we can do anything that we imagine if we respect the operational coherences in the domain in which we imagine it. But we don't have to do everything that we imagine. One of the things that we care in our children is that they do not do everything that they imagine that they can do. Not because they can do it, they have to do it. Do we want to do it? Unitary epistemology. A colleague of mine, Jimena Davila, calls this condition the unitary epistemology. We are the fundaments for explaining whatever we explain. And I thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much for this enlightening thought. While you were talking, I was struck by I would say, the new argument that you are bringing to what is happening today, or sort of a condition of general solipsism, with, of course, Zeilinger's cautionary statement yesterday saying that what's reality? Well, reality is really what there is and what information we have about it, which was a different explanation. And it makes me think about something that I've been exploring a bit, which is like what I call the post-Galilean moment. That at the time of Galileo, even though he was not uniquely responsible for this transformation, Western Europe started moving from a world of myth, mythical explanation, which were perfectly valid for them, to a world of science, of which the Large Hadron Collider is a tributary to a great extent. Yet, everybody seems to have talked about a limit of what we can possibly observe, and you present to us something that sort of makes a coherent explanation of the fact that we are now without real certitudes, but only convenient certitudes for the moment that we are sharing. This post-Galilean moment is actually introducing all kinds of new possibilities that depend exactly on what you were saying before. What kind of imagination, what kind of life do we want to live, and what kind of imagination, what are the imaginations or imaginary areas that we would like to explore and see developed? So maybe I know that we could stand where we are, and I'm sure that there are many questions, but I would have wanted to ask you one first question. Could you just describe what you mean by experimental epistemology? Because I think it is a very pertinent question to what you have just said. And then maybe
yes.
Yeah. No, he has one. So.
Ah, okay. I had in my laboratory in the medical school in 1962, I think it was, put a legend at the entrance of my laboratory. Laboratory of Experimental Epistemology. And I was very young then, only 36, so I was learning. I did not know fully what epistemology was, but looking back, indeed what I was doing was saying, whatever you accept that an experiment tells you is what you are going to use as a fundament for whatever you do. So in that sense, one can say that the naming was not fully out of mark. Because the experiment was going to tell what was the case. And indeed, this is the very interesting thing. Let me use a couple of minutes. I was studying color vision. I was trying to correlate the activity of the retina with the colors as I presented them on a board, different colors. And I could never correlate the activity of the retina with the spectral composition of the colors. Never. I did many experiments, many pigeons went through the university with me. And one day I said, maybe the question is wrongly put. Maybe the question is not if the activity of the retina correlates with the spectral composition of the colors there, but maybe the activity of the retina correlates with the name that we give to the color. And when I said this, everybody thought that I was rather crazy, because names are arbitrary, but it turns out that names tell something about how one is. When you see red, you put the name red, you point there, red, but you are telling, in me is happening what I'm calling red. And so as I decided, perhaps I can indeed show that the activity of the retina correlates with the name, and I could show that. And this is what, for me, the first serious path to see the nervous system operating as a closed system. But there you have that the experimental act is not only showing what you think that you are showing, it's showing much more if you know how to think outside what you expect. And in that sense, whatever we do as an experiment is, of course, an element that will constitute an experimental epistemology, so to say, as a fundament for further reflection and thinking in the domain of what we do, not in the domain of reality independent from us.
That being said, what we have been learning yesterday and today, if I follow your argument about the operational relational coherences, don't you think that the expansion of the conditions of our living right now has been considerable by going back to the origin, using the scientific explanation, which is a rationalization or emotional relationship to this origin? Well, how do you see that?
Well, this is indeed the case, but even some of the physicists yesterday emphasized that whatever you are doing in physics has to do with what you do. You design the instrument, you design how to look at the observation, what you do. For example, CERN, I mean, this gigantic accelerator. Mm-hmm. Well, we claim that has to do with what? With what? With what we do. I put myself in the community of human beings and say, we human beings have made, engineers, physicists have made this fantastic instrument. And what is telling us? That for which we have designed the structure. Mm-hmm. So it's telling us something in relation to a world that arises with what we do. It's not telling about something that is independent of what we do, but about something that arises with what we do. And so, but this is not solipsism, because I said human existence occurs in the continuous transcendency of doing things together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is what I meant. I mean, I thought the expansion of everybody's epistemology right now.
You're right, yeah.
But maybe because everybody's involved, I should now have a chance, leave a chance for everybody to ask questions. So is there a question that arises? Yes, one question right here. I'll check the, because you have a microphone, so
true, yeah.
So thank you for your explanation, but I would like to know more about the coherence of imagination, because I'm a journalist, Italian journalist, and we like to study the present, to imagine the future. But how can be my imagination coherent? I mean, imagination, I suppose it is free and has to do, in Italian we say fuochi d'artificio. I don't know how to say in English, and I cannot imagine a coherence in the imagination.
If we follow what I was presenting, we cannot but realize that if we exist in the moment of the autopoiesis, I mean, if we take a photograph of autopoiesis, we do not take a photograph of autopoiesis. If you take a photograph of a person running, you do not take the photograph of the person running. It's a photograph, not film or video. You take a stick, you stop everything, and the person is with one leg up and the other on the floor, for example. But you don't see the process of running. In order to see the process of running, you must follow the process. Well, the same thing with respect to living. So what happens is that life, living, what we do, occurs in a continuous present, in a continuous changing present. A continuous changing present. And so the past does not exist, it's not now, it's something that we think about our origin. Something that we propose to explain how come that we are here. And the future does not exist either. It's an extrapolation of what we do now. And this is why we have two interesting words, science fiction and fantasy. Somebody says, this is science fiction, or this is fantasy. I mean, this novel is a fantasy of the future. This novel is a science fiction of the future. Science fiction is an extrapolation of the coherence of our doings now, in actual manipulations and some scientific knowledge. But the fantasy is an extrapolation of things that we think, desires that we have to make a future. So it's different. And so with science fiction, in a way, what we're saying, if what we do know now and what we think now we go on doing and thinking, then that and that will happen. But the future does not exist. It's a manner of being now.
Questions? Yes, in the back there.
Mr. Maturana, thank you very much for this lecture. I think that these reflections are actually in the current science of physics not very much discussed and reflected. These are basically we are in a field of very speculative physics, so I think this input was very much important, and to make the connection to the theme and to the Large Hadron Collider. I mean, it would be too complicated now to speak about Kant, and that he already said that we are not able to reach the thing on itself. So I would leave that out a little bit to put my idea in very easy words. I would ask you, isn't this a problem if ideas occur concerning the Large Hadron Collider, even from the core of physics? Like Frank Wilczek, he said that there might be eventually a possibility that this experience could be very dangerous, that there might be an Ice-9 reaction that was even could endanger the whole planet, which is hypothetically, but at least possible and theoretically explainable. Isn't it a problem that physicists are now only controlling themselves, like the safety group at CERN is basically done at CERN itself? Isn't it necessary at least to bring in a certain self-reflection of the system by, for example, another sort of science like risk research? And this was not done yet. Isn't this the first step to evaluate something that the risks concerned in these high energy experiments?
I do not know if I understood or heard properly your question. But what I would say is that whatever we do is always our responsibility, because it depends on what we want to conserve. If we expect that certain experiments will produce certain results, we better are aware that we are expecting that, and that those results will take place, telling us something about the coherences of what we are doing. But it is us who choose what to do. And we live a moment in which, well, it's not now, no? But one of the peculiar things of human beings is that can say, I don't like it, or I do like it. So we human beings can always reflect on what we are doing and choose to do it or not to do it. And so the question is, how are we scientists reflecting upon what we do? Are we taking seriously our responsibility of what we do? But this is a question that every one of us has to answer, because we are always in the danger of thinking that, oh, I have the truth. I mean, if in a culture of truth, in a culture of certainty, because truth and certainty are not as what we think. I mean, certainty is an emotion. I am certain that something is the case means I do not know. Exactly, this is what it means. I'm certain means I do not know. So it is, the interesting thing is that if we take this seriously, that we human beings are the origin of everything, and that not everything is desirable, at the same time, not all fantasies are fulfillable because, can be fulfilled because there are no operational coherences for the fantasy, because we have invented a different domain. We cannot pretend to impose anything on others. We have to create domains of interobjectivity.
So we have, sorry. Oh, we're cutting into the break time, and we have 2 more questions. Maybe
fine,
we can go
fine.
on. No, stay there, stay there. So we have 1 question there and 1 there. We'll start with that one, and we have to make it a really, unless you don't want to have a break, we should make it really fast. So go ahead. Dr. Bertolucci?
Yeah, it was not a question, it was a comment on what was said before. I wanted just to say that what did this thing about physics being dangerous is a thing that is a bit part of a past version, which was probably somehow cut away by middle age evolution. Physicists are not suicidal, are human beings, and they are reflecting very well on what they are doing by an open process, which is called peer reviewing, and which is observation. Physicists and scientists in general look at nature, interpret the nature, they don't modify the nature. One good reason why LHC will never be dangerous from this point of view is that despite our ingenuity, nature is doing much better than LHC in high energy physics since 13.7 billion years. And if dangerous thing would have been happened by accelerating particles, since every moment we are crossed by accelerated particle of energy much higher than any human energy, the world will not be here, will not be reflecting on that. So please stay tranquil that nothing is going to happen except new discoveries.
Thank you for that reassuring precision. Last question. Right there. Yeah, here, you got it. Hello, there.
Thank you. I should like to ask you just in a short way, what would you consider as the limits of explanations? Could there be wrong explanations in steering our behavior, especially if you think of the financial crisis or anything of that sort? But the point is, when you talk about reality being an explanatory proposition, and then you can talk about constructive explanations, where would be the limits? And, well, to cut it short, could you condense the whole thing down to saying something like, we use fiction to talk about reality?
Well, the limits will be what you are willing to accept as an explanation or what not. When I say reality is an explanatory proposition, using the expression reality in the way we usually speak about reality, when we say this is real, as if we were speaking about something that is independent of what we do. And this is not the case. And so we pose something as if we're independent of what we do, which we call real or nature, to validate or to sustain our claim that this is valid in front of others. If I were to say, ladies and gentlemen, be objective, what will you feel? Or be realistic. What does one feel? If you are in a community and somebody says, be objective, you immediately know that this person wants you to think as he or she thinks. No, that's the same if he says, be realistic. So it is good. Yeah, it is good to have this as a point of reflection. In a way, we could say that everything that we do is real. But it's not universal, because it depends on what the criterion we're claiming to claim that what we're doing is to be acceptable or desirable, or why I want to do it. But if I believe in angels, I will move around with angels, and I will see them whenever something moves. And if I believe in protons, I will have no problem with physics and protons and looking into what happens when protons collide. And this is what we do. The interesting thing is that realizing this is that we can become serious about our responsibility. That's all.
Well, thank you very much, Humberto Maturana. We are very grateful and for the privilege of listening to your presentation and to the clear exposition that you have made of a philosophical position today. It's very important for us and a good reminder. We are now going to go into a break which will last 15 minutes. Please do come back because we have another fascinating moment which will be sharing the experience of Rolf Höher, who is the general director of the CERN, and Joichi Ito, who's just been made director of the Media Lab at MIT. So we're looking forward to hear them as well. Have a nice break.